morning because it's quite, I would say, stuffy up here, and last week as well. I found a fan, which is behind me, blowing cold air at me on the max setting at the moment.
I did wonder what that noise was. I thought you were in a wind tunnel.
Oh, I am in a wind tunnel and I'm loving it. Can you hear it?
I can a little bit.
Is it too loud?
If you could move it away easily a little bit, that would be good.
I couldn't.
Okay, all right. We'll put up with it, listeners, won't we? For Judith's comfort, because it just sounds like, when you get someone talking to a camera and they haven't got a dead cat on their muffler. They haven't got a dead cat muffler on their microphone.
Not really, no.
No, well, anyway, that's what it sounds like. But it's fine. Okay. It's very, very
And
subliminal.
please, if you could avoid the expression dead cat, because I'm looking after a cat this week who is a little bit raddled and old. That would be good.
Welcome to Own It, Your Business and Your Life, with Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. In this podcast, we're going to cover everything you need to embrace to become a successful entrepreneur, marketing, money, and much, much more. How to create a business doing just what you love. How to own it, your business and your life. This one will be fast, funny, feisty, and very lively. So sit back and enjoy the show. Good morning.
Hello, caller. How are you?
I'm very well, considering.
Yes, considering. So tell me what you're considering.
Well, the fact that I've had no internet since last Thursday night.
What day is it today? Thursday, so nearly a week.
Yes, it's been very, very trying. Basically, it just went off. It was struggling. I realised when I was trying to upload something that should have taken 3 minutes, and I realised it was going to take 5 hours, that something was dramatically wrong. So then it involved trying to find out if anyone else was affected, and then it involved ringing Cosmote, which, let me tell you what that involves. You have to have, out here, in order to ring any utilities or any shops or anything, you need to have a Greek mobile, because the Greeks are completely phobic about ringing any other mobile apart from a Greek one. And so in order to get a Greek mobile, you have to travel to Kalamata, or you have to buy one online and get it delivered, which takes about a week.
Do you have to have the phone, or can you just have a SIM card you put in your own phone?
Oh, well, you see. Well, I thought I sorted all this because 2 years ago I went and got a SIM card, and I thought I was prepared for this, so I went and bought myself a voucher to top up my SIM card. So when my landlady arrived, because they'll only talk to you if you're the owner or you've got a tax number or something like that,
yep.
She arrived so we could ring Cosmote together. It was Monday morning, and we started to ring Cosmote, and there was no answer at all. But in the meantime, we discovered that my SIM card was locked. And then she said, well, when did you get this SIM card? And I said, well, it was a couple of years ago. She said, have you used it since? I said, well, no, not really. She said, well, they recycle them. So if you don't use it for 12 months, it gets taken away from you.
Oh, gosh.
And the number's recycled. So she said, you'll need a new SIM card. So I went and got a new SIM card, and then I came back to find that, of course, I've now got a new phone, which is locked to O2, I think, because a client of mine is bought me a new phone and is paying for my phone bills.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Yes, and so I can't use my phone at all for any other SIM cards until the year contract is up or whatever. So now I need to either go to Kalamata, 45 minutes each way, to buy a phone, or I need to order one online and wait a week or so for it to be delivered. Or I need to get the kids to rummage around in one of their drawers to find out if we've got any old mobile phones, because I don't really want to have to learn how to use another mobile phone just for the occasional moments when I might need to contact a Greek shop.
No, I agree with you. An old phone would be perfect for this.
It would, yes. So that's what they're doing, because of course they always upgrade their, as soon as they can. So they're bound to have some phones knocking around. Phoebe just sold my old one, unfortunately, to I left it there last time I was there and she sold it, so I could have kept that. Anyway, so we tried for about 4 or 5 hours. My landlady gave up and went away, and then left me her mobile phone. And I tried for about 4 or 5 hours, only to find out the next day that it was a bank holiday on Monday because there was an election on Sunday. So that's why they weren't answering the phone. But of course, there was no recorded announcement to say that. And so Tuesday, I tried at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Finally, someone answered at 9 o'clock, managed to report my fault. And he said, OK, well, an engineer will have to come out because it's an external fault on your line externally, but you might need access to the house. So what's the mobile? So I gave him the mobile. Now, the mobile's starting to run out of battery by now. So anyway, so we get to yesterday afternoon, I said to my landlady, I'm going to have to bring your mobile up to get charged because otherwise it's going to run out of battery. She said, OK, do that then. So I did that, and it was 38 degrees yesterday. So you don't really want to be hanging around the house, if you know what I mean. You want to be down the beach where there's a breeze and you can get in the sea. But I have to be ready at a moment's notice to leap into my car and zoom back up the road should the Cosmote guy want access. Which he's bound to, isn't he? And he's bound to do it at a time that's most inconvenient to me. So that is pretty much it. I'm now piggybacking on a neighbour's internet, which seems okay, doesn't it? So
I think it does seem okay. Yes,
it might come and go occasionally, but we'll just have to wait for it to come back on because it always does come back on. So it might be a few seconds out. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
But Sarah's gone this morning. She departed on the new shared transport carrier, which has sprung up to cater for all the people who can't fit into taxis and haven't got cars due to the increased flights to the Mozambique.
Is she ready and prepared for the 7th circle of hell?
Yeah, well, apparently it's much better now.
Okay.
We don't know how they've improved it, but it seems to have definitely improved.
Okay.
So, either they've given up on scanning passports, or they've got a lot more people in, or I don't know what they could have done really. But it's all fine now.
Okay.
in the miraculous way that things do improve themselves, seriously, mostly. Kim's still here. Got another couple of days with her, and apart from the internet debacle, it's all lovely.
Okay, very good.
What about you?
Well, hello from Suffolk.
Oh, okay.
I moved house again yesterday, and there are strange goings-on here that you might have just heard, you might not have just heard, but the landline rang. Did you hear that?
I did vaguely hear something.
Yes, a landline rings a lot. I don't answer it because I don't do telephones, as you know, but that might happen 2 or 3 times in the hour. People do seem to phone here. Oh, my God. Well, first of all, have you ever been over, you're not as much of a driver as I am, have you ever been over I don't think you'd like it, the Dartford crossing bridge?
I have, and I don't like it.
It's very much up high. When you only go over the bridge when you're coming north to south, you go through a tunnel when you're going in the direction I was going yesterday.
Right, yeah. I marginally prefer the bridge to the tunnel.
That's interesting. Anyway, what should have been a 2.5-hour journey took me more than 4 hours because the delay to get into the tunnel was quite considerable. But it was okay, and I arrived here. It was much easier to get into the house than she suggested, and it's very nice. But what I'd forgotten is that you come up. I've only been to Suffolk once before because my friends Jane and David have their their weekendy place here, and I'm going to see them for lunch on Sunday. But when you turn off, it's all it's the A12 is a road that connects such ignoble places as Romford, Chelmsford, Colchester, and Ipswich. And when you're bombing up this road, you are lulled into a false sense of not security, but appalledness, really, because it's quite a sort of industrial part of London that is not well connotated. And then you take a left turn off the A12, and it's like, oh my God, I had forgotten that Suffolk is absolutely blissful. The countryside is unmistakable. I don't know if you know a little bit about it. It's not really your
nanny
John Constable. Oh, and do you know John Constable, the artist?
I do. I love John.
Yes, well, you can see straight away you're in Constable country. And July, we've had quite warm weather, so there are hay bales already and things. I know I've said it before on this podcast, but for a woman who deliberately chose London as her home for the entirety of her adult life, the British countryside in the summer months is absolutely unbeatable. It's breathtaking. And Suffolk is the very antidote to the epicentre of Chaveness where I was last week.
Yeah. Don't you mean the summer month, singular?
No, I don't really, because actually the the best month I've worked out is May.
Oh.
But it's still lovely in June and July. August, it gets a bit overblown and over the top, but we're only on the 11th of July yet. So we've got, it's nice. It's breathtaking actually here. And there's a little stream at the bottom of the garden that's all very nice.
Oh,
so,
the bottom
yes,
of the garden.
I know. So this is new gaff is as nice as last week's was last year. I was very brave last week. And when I went to put a review for them on their Facebook page, which they asked me to do.
Oh yeah, the place where.
Well, they had me in an arm lock actually, because we kind of did a quid pro quo, which was that they would help me. I couldn't find anybody on Airtasker to help me load my car up and downstairs. And the deal was that they would, but the implied thing was if you give us a nice review on social media.
Oh,
now,
well done.
I'm quite good at, the art of a review, and the art indeed of what do you call it, a reference. When you're giving a reference for an employee is what you don't say. So, for example, you say the bedroom and the living room are spacious.
Meaning everything else wasn't.
The kitchen and the bathroom are pokey in the extreme. Exactly. So what's important is the lingo. And when I went to put the one on their Facebook page, I realised why they were on me to do it, because the one before me is somebody who clearly didn't enjoy the experience at all, accused them of stealing things and running a brothel and all sorts, honestly. A knocking shop, really.
Well, people just do that out of sheer spite.
Well, then she says, I've got all the emails and we're going to see you in court. It gets really quite ugly. Yes, people are weird, but I certainly never saw any evidence of that, and it wasn't my experience, but it wasn't very nice. It was smelly and uncomfortable. Anyway, let's go there again. I'm beyond there. The bathroom here, I've described to my Facebook group this morning as 3 or 4 times. It actually, I think it's probably 5 or 6 times the space of last week. There's actual floor space where you could, if you wanted, sort of, I don't know, you could do yoga, probably.
You're always saying that, but I'm a little concerned you might actually turn to it at some point.
No, I don't think it's yoga. It's yoga or country dancing, I think, of when you need space in the bathroom for absolutely nothing. Do you know what I mean? But space is a luxury.
It is.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I've got a very bijou bathroom, but it's actually very perfectly adequate.
Can you put your arms out like a starfish in all directions without touching anything?
Well, no, it's not that big, but it is just big enough, and the shower is perfectly adequate. It's got a lovely drencher shower, and it's all modern and new.
I think if you come out of the bathroom feeling like a new woman, you're all right, aren't you? Yeah, I feel like a new woman this morning, because I've not only had, I think they've probably got one of those, I forget what they're called, memory foam mattresses, I think they might be called. It feels a bit firm when you get on it, and turning over is quite difficult because there's no bounce, but... I
had that in Vegas. I kept getting lying down in exhaustion on the bed, and then not being able to move to reach the bedside lamp.
Because they're quite solid, aren't they?
Yeah, and you sink into them, and then you can't do anything.
Yeah, and the other boon this morning, because it's quite, I would say, stuffy up here, and last week as well, I found a fan, which is behind me, blowing cold air at me on the max setting at the moment.
I did wonder what that noise was. I thought you were in a wind tunnel.
No, I am in a wind tunnel, and I'm loving it. Can you hear it?
I can a little bit.
Is it too loud?
If you could move it away easily a little bit, that would be good.
I couldn't.
Okay, all right. We'll put up with it, listeners, won't we? For Judith's comfort, because it just sounds like, when you get someone talking to a camera and they haven't got a dead cat on their muffler. They haven't got a dead cat muffler on their microphone.
Not really, no.
No, well, anyway, that's what it sounds like. But it's fine. Okay. It's very, very
And
subliminal.
Please, if you could avoid the expression dead cat, because I'm looking after a cat this week who is a little bit raddled and old. That would be good. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, we'll do that then. Yeah. So anything else about your week?
No.
All right. So what's fueled your fire this week then?
You go first.
I'll go first. Well, if you'd like to go to nicolacancross.com, you will see the brand new website. Went live overnight, and I've been squirreling about trying to make all the links, making sure all the links work, which they nearly do now. Not in the way I want them to, because they just link to a drip input form, but they don't come up as a sexy light box, because the man who did the redesign and the development, 2 different people actually, the person who did the development of the new design wasn't familiar with Thrive Architect and the way the lead boxes work, so I need to make sure that I can figure that out before they sign off on it. But I'm generally speaking very pleased with it. It looks really, really bright, light, professional and nice, I think.
And already at only 10:14, some of our listeners are giving you feedback.
Are they? Fantastic. From the group? That's marvellous.
Yes. Where you put it?
Oh yeah. So what they did was they. I thought it was going to be a much more complex job than it ended up being. They built a new theme on a custom theme, which I usually tend to avoid like the plague, on Genesis, the Genesis framework, which is what Steve had already built the old theme on anyway. So I'm on the same framework. I'm on the same sort of kind of thing that talks to itself fine. They've gone along and they've redesigned a lot of my key pages, about 10 of them, I think. And then they've now put those key pages in place, and I have redirected my old versions of my pages to the new ones. So until I can get round to renaming the new ones as the old ones were called, because of course, there's always lots of email links, and there's lots of links out on the website leading to certain pages. So I've got to make sure that there are no broken links. And no broken links out there in the big wide world. And the easiest way to do that is to redirect your old pages to the new pages while you get around to renaming them. So then the other thing that I was concerned about was how the blog would look, because and to be fair, it doesn't look as nice as it used to. It sort of does look nicer than it used to because the layout's nicer, but it's chopping off the images a bit strangely, so the text isn't centered in them, which makes it look a little bit messy. So I'm going to have to get Margelle to do our imagery slightly differently so that the text sits in the middle when it comes onto the blog. So there's a few tiny little niggles like that, but generally speaking, it's been a very painless experience because all my other old pages are all still there working away in the background, but they've added quite a nice background to pages generally, so they just all look a bit nicer. So so I'm quite pleased with it overall. I looking back, would I have still liked to have won the prize and ended up having to pay the developer? Not perhaps at that time, but then having said that, that was a time when I did have the money to do it. So I was pushed into doing something I knew I should do, but didn't really want to spend the money on at the time.
Well, that sometimes happens, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
We're pushed into things that are good for us that we don't really want to do.
Yeah. Now, the real key will be in its performance, because I'm running Google Ads to it, the homepage, and I've been running them for 2 weeks prior to the switchover, and I know what the conversion figures are previously to that. So we'll see what the conversion figures are in 2 weeks' time.
And why would that change? Just because of the way it looks and reads?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. Because it's probably more authoritative now. It probably looks better. It probably performs better on mobile. It just, well, that's the theory. You've got no idea until it goes live. Of course, it might be an absolute disaster. Like some other friend of ours who had a massive website redesigned by a very professional firm, and it absolutely killed his conversion stone dead. So,
oops. What happens then? Can you revert?
Well, he couldn't, no, because it was too much of a big job. But he is now very, very busily building his website again. Oh. Yeah, in the way that, with all the same content, but making it look a little bit more. He's having a much more hands-on because he's using Thrive Architect, so he's actually doing it himself, and he's having a much more hands-on experience of what he wants it to look like.
Okay.
And he can test as he goes, because the problem with a lot of these, I said to these guys, my key thing is I need to be able to split test, so I need to be able to clone your pages at will and put my own content in them, and I need to be able to update all the content myself. I can't be coming back to you guys every time I want any changes made, so they've designed it in such a way that it can do that. And I think that's a measure of their professionalism, that they were able to accommodate my needs like that.
I think it's totally bizarre that anybody would ever think one wouldn't want to do that as a client.
Well, because a lot of clients don't want to. They're scared of breaking things. They're scared of...
Yeah, but to have to go to somebody and wait
and
for
pay
them to make changes. Even imagine wanting to change one word, which is something I might likely to want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And to have to pay the designer to do that for you. Yeah, but well, that's why WordPress became so popular in 2006. Because,
Quite.
And that's why before that, TypePad.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I was talking to a colleague this week who was talking to a service provider about doing some digital marketing for her, and half of the offer, the second half of the offer, was very attractive. The first half of the offer was a tied-in website. We pay for your hosting, and as soon as you stop having it, you lose your website. I said, who on earth would go for that in 20 months?
Mental.
It is mental. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what's fueled my fire this week. I'm eagerly looking to seeing what difference it makes, if any.
Okay.
And what about you?
I'm writing here, what diff? ? The homeowner of this house is a writer. The female half of the homeowners is a writer. And there's a stack of 3 of her books in the main kitchen living room where I'm working, sort of like on a hall table in a way. I'm not sure if they're gifts for me, I suspect not, or if I'm supposed to read one very neatly and or leave the price and take one or all 3 away. And she hasn't mentioned it, she hasn't left me a note on the topic. So last week, she and I on that, last week it was you, I think, we talked about how people don't read long-winded written instructions, which is what she's left me. Untrusted house sitters. There's I forget what it's called, a welcome pack or something that tells you everything you need to know. And everything was so much easier than she said, which is a good lesson for me, because the complexity and the depth of her instructions made it sound difficult, and it wasn't. But I have had to read them endlessly, actually, because other people's houses are quite complex. And the funny thing is that you have a system, whether you know it or not, of how you run your life at home.
Yeah.
And I have a system, but I have to adapt mine to the way that everybody else lives their house and home. So, for instance, every website, every place I've ever stayed so far, the local council website's very helpful about dustbins. Local council website here? No, you've got to phone them if you want to find anything out. And I worked out, because they're in the middle of moving over to some new system, that tomorrow, Friday, is probably dustbin day, which means I've got to put it out today, Thursday. No instructions about dustbins anywhere in the house, in the welcome pack, online or off. The next door neighbour will help me. I've met her. She's very handy. But so I emailed the homeowner overnight, not just about dustbins, but to report on the first day with the cat, which she invited me to do. And she replied, but she only answered half of the question. It's the grey dustbin in the garage. Yeah, well, what goes in the grey dustbin in the garage? Is it recyclables or is it landfill, as they call it here? So anyway, that's not the point of this. The point of this is they felt like rules because they were so long. And you remember we said last week that I said to you, I confess that rules just go in one brain cell and out another almost straight away. But that you're slightly worried when you're not so much about keeping a cat alive. There goes the phone again, sorry. But not wanting to offend somebody. So, for instance, I've got cat litter. Is there a pooper scooper? I've asked. I can't find it if there is. If not, I can, improvise, but I don't like the thought of that. But the main point of this story is you don't want to offend people by getting it wrong, and for them to say to the woman that was here before, she was totally bizarre. I don't know what on earth she thought she was doing. But it's so easy to do that because your normal is not my normal, basically. But driving to her home yesterday, before I was blown away by the Suffolk countryside, it got me thinking about writing generally. So there's her books, there's her long written instructions, and the way she communicates. And I had all these thoughts going around in my head, and I was applying them to, because, I think like her too, in a funny sort of way. I think if I'm going to try and explain something, one of the best ways of me to do it is to write it all down. And there's something I think I will want to explain to the world quite soon. And so I rehearsed it out loud in a sort of, shame I didn't record it actually. I sort of speak it out loud as if I was writing it. So what's fueled my fire is sort of thinking about communicating in the written word, really.
Oh, okay.
Sort of a long, rambly explanation about the importance this week of the written word in my life, from this woman who is a writer, and how writers perceive the world.
Yes.
She thinks the longer and more written instruction she gives me, the better. It's not necessarily true.
Yeah, because ADD kicks in.
That's her operating system, don't you see?
I've got to start making a manual for the people who are coming to stay here when I'm not here.
Well, that's it, you see. Yeah. It's a manual. That's exactly right.
How we do it here, manual.
Yeah. But actually, if in doubt, bullet points and brevity.
Yes, exactly. Bullet points and brevity, very good.
But also let people keep a note of all the questions they ask you, because then you either point them back to the manual, like you and I always used to do, or your manual's missing, where's the pooper scooper?
Yes. Yeah, let's update the manual, make it better.
So, for instance, there were instructions should the cat vomit on the carpet, which the cat did yesterday. So I opened up the thing and worked out what she wanted me to do. So it's not, when you're in somebody else's house, it's nice to have instructions to follow.
God, I so couldn't be a pet sitter.
Well, she won't do it again. She won't do it again. I remember that when I moved into Gareth's flat, Fish vomited the first day as well. I think it's not trauma, that's too strong a word. It's the excitement. I don't know what it is. I think when maybe cats are a bit like this. They vom as a test, I think.
A test?
Yes. Yeah, and I think I've passed the test. She sits on me anyway. She's a very sweet little thing. But if you've ever owned a pet, their poo and vomiting and hair goes along with the territory. And if you're not prepared for it, you're not a pet owner.
It's a bit like a child.
Well, yeah, I'd much rather do it with a pet than with a child. Thanks very much.
All right. Good stuff. So tell us what our focus of the week is, Judith.
Yeah, we're going to have one of our listener guests on. We're going to have Clare Hanbury, who's going to talk to us about taking the podcast with her when she goes on her travels to Africa. Now, you and I have both known Clare for a very long time. And she, in 2013, she set up her own children's charity called Children for Health, which educates children's communities in places like Africa about HIV, malaria, and nutrition in ways that are easy and fun, bite-sized pieces of information which are transmitted via texting on mobile phones. The children are aged 10 to 14, which she described, I really was very moved by the way she described them as powerful influencers. And now those children know things such as when a child has diarrhea, what they need is hydration. Well, I didn't know that, and we've seen from Comic Relief that parents historically were just watching their children die. But now, because of Clare's charity, the 10 to 14-year-olds will know what to tell their parents to do. Anyway, she gives us 4 reasons why she enjoys Own It on her travels to Mozambique and beyond. And she shares bullet points about stuff she's learned from listening to us, which can be converted from our businessy context to her work in her social sector. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I will tell you out loud and then put in the show notes that it's childrenforhealth.org. And she mentions lifeskillshandbooks.com. I will put them in the show notes.
So welcome, Clare Hanbury. Clare is a long-time listener of the podcast, and she's also been, she's known both Judith and I for many years now. So Clare is here to talk to us about taking the podcast to Africa. But first, Clare, can you tell us a bit about yourself, where you come from, where you live, what you do, and where people can find you online?
Okay, thanks, Nicola and Judith. And first of all, it's a great honour to be on your podcast. I am a very long-time listener. I'm based just outside of Cambridge, so I'm in the UK and not in Africa. And my background is really as a school teacher, first of all, and overseas. And then I started working with children's charities who do work abroad. And I founded my own charity, which is where you can find me online, which is Children for Health in 2013. And although I started it in 2013, this builds upon all the previous work I've done really from about 1989. And in a nutshell, I suppose, Children for Health seeks to mobilise children to be health advocates in their families and communities. And we focus on things like immunisation and malaria and HIV, nutrition and stuff. And this all sounds very serious, but our stuff, what we're aiming to do is to develop content, and we co-create this content, which is easy to use and fun as well. And I expect, as many of your listeners know, because so many of us have travelled and know countries in Africa, children aged between 10 and 14, that's a middle childhood slot in most developing countries. They're the ones doing a lot of the childcare. And if you can inform that and recognise and praise this role, children can become really incredible and powerful influencers. You get them to almost become like mini health workers, mini educators within their families. And now I expect all the listeners will be asking, what's this got to do with your podcast? And I met Nicola, I think it was about 2006, Nicola. Anyway, I got to know your work, and I started about thinking about the internet marketing and using the digital space to convey some of these key health education ideas and activities much more directly to people like parents and teachers and health workers in Africa and elsewhere. And by the way, I must emphasise that it isn't about me sitting just outside Cambridge and inventing lots of things which I then dump upon people in Africa, because I've been working for such a long time. I've got an extensive network. So everything I do and everything you can find on our website is co-created. But what was changing in that sort of time, 2006 and 2008, that sort of time, was the digital space, and also mobiles were beginning to take off. And if I can paint you a picture, I do a lot of work in rural Mozambique. And one of my workshops and training events, this head teacher turned up. He had a borrowed suit, so which was about 3 sizes too big for him. He had no shoes. He walked there. He had a laptop and 2 mobiles, one of which was a smartphone.
Wow.
So that kind of like, people kind of think, oh, well, Africa, digital. It's the way in which I noticed that sort of development was really, it was almost bypassing a lot of the stages that we'd gone through in a lot of places. And I absolutely had to get to grips with the digital and mobile space. And then Judith, I think we met in about 2008.
Well, I always have this image of you at a table in Gatwick, but we also met at a motorway service station.
It wasn't Gatwick. It was halfway between you and me on the A1 at some motorway service station. I bought a pile of books and I hadn't a clue what I was really going to talk to you about. And you said, come on, let's just start with this book. And you picked out my life skills book. And by the way, I've got another website about life skills. And you said, you can make a business out of this. And I, of course, almost fell off my chair. And then I thought, well, just be brave and set up this website and do what Judith tells you to do and set up a community and start blogging and, see what happens. And within a very short space of time, I had something like 500 visitors to that website a week and hundreds of downloads and a little tidy income of people who wanted to buy the digital copy of my life skills book that I'd created under Judith's insistence and guidance.
It's a recurring theme this morning of me being bossy.
Yeah, well, what's really great about that is I'm really bossy, and I think we kind of match each other in bossiness. So it was just so great and so refreshing to meet someone as bossy as me. Really. But I'll sort of get to the podcast in a minute, really. But it's just impossible to really set up here how broadly and how deeply your ideas in this podcast have influenced what I've done in my rather peculiar and niche little world. And so I just thought I'd pick out just a few things. I've got 4 kind of things written down of ways in which I think this podcast has particularly helped me. And I'm probably there's far more ways. In fact, I went and had a look at the list of your podcast titles, and I thought, well, that one, and there's that one, and there's that one. and so I thought, well, I'm not going to look anymore. I'm just going to have a think. So the first one, it's a kind of an operational one for me now, which is thinking of partnerships, which we often have to do in this international development sector. So thinking of partnerships, like I have a partnership with Save the Children, a possible partnership brewing with the WHO. I know that sounds ridiculous because we're an organisation that operates out of one small room in my house. So it's quite cool to have a partnership brewing with WHO, I can tell you. But this partnership thing, which is it's a word that's done to death in my sector. I just love the joint venture thing that you talk about, and setting up a joint venture. And there seems to be a kind of anywhere psychological distinction between partnership, which is slightly woolly, and joint venture, which isn't. So I really try and set up my partnerships using the kind of tips you've given us all on the joint venture thing. And I remember one podcast when you talk about, really figuring out when to say no to a joint venture. And that was at a moment where I was really wrestling with something and whether or not I should go forward. And it just, I went back home, and I often listen to your podcast walking the dog. So I was in some field when you were talking about that. I was sat on a wall, and I went, right. So I went home and I emailed this person and I said, I just don't think we're a good match. And I think they were amazed, because that phrase that you often use as well, the matching and the alignment and things like that, just really isn't really used much in our sector.
No.
Everyone's sort of begging to work with each other, and often get into a lot of trouble. The second one is measurement. And although this sounds really obvious, I think that the kind of way in which you advise us to measure with the spreadsheets and the metrics and all the rest of it, it just helped me really get organised. And I love this concept of growing what you measure. And I really found that, and I got a great big spreadsheet. And we've got lots of free resources on our website. And one of the things that we've done is we've looked at all of the people who download our stuff and which countries they come from. And since that, I set that up about a year ago, we've had over 11,000 downloads in 156 countries. Ooh. And I wouldn't have known that had I not, been on this podcast and felt really, no, I've got to, when I say been on this podcast, I mean listen to this podcast and really understood the power of metrics and measuring and thinking about what you're doing, not endlessly trying to do the next thing.
It's best about making informed decisions, isn't it, rather than stabbing in the dark?
I think so, and I don't think I'm really very good yet at the sort of social media measurement and all of that sort of stuff. It's coming, and I'm trying to participate on Be Everywhere Online. I've actually discovered earlier this week that I actually was doing that a bit in 2017 as well. So things are very slow, but my work, there's a lot to do. There are big projects that come in that I've then got to do, so I have to slightly pick things up and put things down.
But isn't it encouraging to you to know that 11,000 people in 156 countries have enjoyed your output from your little room in Cambridge?
It's absolutely ridiculous, Judith.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
No, it's marvellous.
And then, we found other hubs, like there's a marvellous hub called World Reader, and they've taken our titles, and we discovered fairly recently that, between about 3 months, we had 4,000 readers of our storybooks in Portuguese in Mozambique by children on mobile phones.
Yes.
And, oh, God, this stuff is just, it gets me up.
I agree.
Just to interject, Claire, I remember very vividly doing some ironing in 2006. I know exactly which house I lived in, and we moved every sort of 12 months at that time. So it was just after the hotel, and I was doing the ironing, and I was watching this program on the BBC about how there was this entrepreneur in Africa who was buying up second-hand mobile phones and selling them out of backs of lorries for $10 a pop. And I remember thinking, and then the people were going back to their villages and setting up shady areas where people, and then hiring their mobile phones out for people to make calls on. And
you cannot imagine how important this connectivity is.
Yeah, and I think where's it coming? Where's the signal coming from? Well, it's coming from satellites going over the top.
Exactly. And there's quite a lot of people doing that whole satellite thing. And there's a project I know really well in Kenya, where the Maasai, I don't know, they're quite a kind of colourful people, if you like. Lots of people have heard of the Maasai. Anyway, they don't get signal in their village where they are, so they've got one person who and they've got this rota system. So everyone sticks their mobiles in a basket, and this person runs up this hill at the beginning and end of each day in order to get all the messages going out and the messages coming in on the phone. So I just love that.
Yes. Incredible.
Sounds like Cornwall.
And actually, probably is. I just love the way. Oh, and the other thing that I did with some teachers that I was working with in Mozambique is find out how much they were spending on data. And it was about a third of their salary.
Wow.
And you just can't believe how, and that to me just spoke volumes about how important it was to, this connectivity and the way, the scope for supporting people through text messages, the scope for, delivering simple content, which is what we develop, to mobile phones and blah, blah, blah. I don't think we've reached our anything like breakthrough moment, because while 11,000 downloads in 12 months is good in 156 countries, it's kind of not in any sense sort of viral. But I just think we're heading in the right direction, and we're getting enough metrics in really to help us with our fundraising as well. So that's number 2. And number 3, I've got 4, is the business of taking care of myself and the work-life balance. And I think that's something that people in my sector in particular, they're flying around the world, they're doing too many trips. They're not recovering between their trips. They're just loading themselves up with the most ridiculous schedule. And I've done a lot of saying no in the last few years. Again, it's like, rather fueled by the work-life thing, own it, your business and your life, own your life. What I'm doing, it doesn't pay me very much money, so I've got to love what I'm doing, or it's just not going to work. It's not going to work for me. I'm going to burn out and join the great pile of burnout, international development people that there are in this world. And I want to carry on doing this work till I fall over and can't breathe anymore. It's definitely my sort of, I feel very vocational about it. It's not just something I'm doing for a bit. I've sort of done it since 1989, and I just don't see an end to the need of it.
Can I just say something here? You're our fourth interview back-to-back this morning, and every single one of the women have mentioned burnout.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully I've mentioned it in the context that I don't feel I am burnt out.
No, you've mentioned it in exactly the same context, they all had a pivotal moment when they woke up and realised that they were headed towards that if they didn't make changes. And, exactly what you've said in their own language, actually.
Yeah.
It's a common theme today, which is great.
Yeah.
The zeitgeist is, I'm loving that we've helped you with that one, actually. I'm feeling sort of goosebumpy about it. And also, can I just say that in number 1 and number 3, you got great results from saying no.
Yes. And then the fourth one, which is such a big one, which you're kind of mentioning every week, which, is so relevant to me, which is the marketing piece, which sounds sort of a bit boring, the sort of marketing selling. But it's that business of kind of look at what you've done, hold up what you've done, and get that out to people. Yes, I'm really keen on developing new resources on disability and well-being and immunisation and blah, 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 all these new things that aren't on the website yet. They aren't bits of content yet. But look, I've got, we've got a booklet which does our 100 messages for children to learn and share. And we've managed in the last year to get that into 20 languages. Wow. Yes. I've got to spend a bit more time mentioning that to people rather than all my time creating the next thing.
Yeah.
So it's that, hold on moment, which I think comes across so well in what you often say with the marketing of your book. I know that I could probably fruitfully spend, 4 weeks per little piece of content we've got. I mean, I never will do that, but it's recognising the value of what we've done and really trying to get that out there and not always kind of trying to find the next thing to do. I mean, the difficulty slightly for me is that obviously you get funding. We raise charitable funding. So it's trying to raise the funding and you've got to create something new and exciting that people might want to fund. Because it's very hard to get funding in for marketing what you've already got. I mean, I do try, but that's harder. So those are kind of the 4 big kind of chunky ones. And I thought that, I shouldn't just rabbit on the whole, because I know there will be, what I want to do is to try and be a bit useful in what I say to other people, but I really don't know how to be useful.
Can I just say I have this little fantasy in my mind often with you, because I see pictures occasionally of you in Mozambique and things like that. How often do you listen to the podcast on your travels?
I stream it everywhere. So I've been India. I was in I streamed it the last time I streamed it in an exotic place, which is before Christmas. I was in Cambodia in a place called Kampong Cham, next to the that big river, I've forgotten, the Mekong. Yep. I was sat there in my hotel with my feet on the desk and a beer, listening to Own It.
Lovely.
I've been on lots of, dusty journeys, going up and down hills on tracks, not even tarmac roads, listening to it.
Yeah, this is gorgeously romantic, you see. I love this.
Yes.
And that explains whenever I look at these statistics and I think, oh my God, where's that?
Who's listening to us in the Mekong? Now we know. There is an observation I would like to make here about you, Clare, which is only you. Now, if I'm generalising and other people are saying, no, me too, Judith, but let me know. But only you could. You're clever, okay? So what you've done is you've extrapolated something which is essentially commercial and adapted it to fit your social development sector, which is brilliant.
Well, I think part of that is that I'm sort of furious about the charity model.
Yes,
feel that the charity model is just ancient, stupid, and what the problem with the charity model is that when you arrive in a country, just imagine, I don't know, Ugandans arriving in South London and pushing you around, your nutritional life.
Yeah.
What on earth have they got to do with your life?
I know.
And similarly, why should anyone in Tet in Mozambique or Uttar Pradesh take the blindest bit of notice of what I have to say?
It reminds me of that very patriarchal thing where, when we were, empire, isn't it? Where we're arriving and teaching them they've got to be Christians and things. It's just,
So what I endeavour to do, well, one is that I use coaching when I'm with people. And so, your coachy bit is the other thing, which is if you put someone at the centre of their own solutions, you're not lording it over them, are you? Because you're never giving them a solution. Yeah. You're asking very good questions.
Yes.
So my aim is to be there and to ask questions and to function as a facilitator. Everyone wants me to be an expert, and I refuse to be an expert. And very soon they get into it. I've got all sorts of games and things that I use in order to coax people into their own leadership, if you like.
Ownership. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, their own ownership. And that begins to sound a little bit cliche, but the coaching piece has been really important to me. And so hearing about your coaching and things like that is definitely a constant reminder. But there's another thing as well with charity. If you arrive not only as a supposed expert, but you're arriving with money in your pocket, people are very keen on your money.
Yes.
And they will take it out of your pocket and they will spend it and they will do exactly what you want them to do in order for them to get that money until you leave.
Yes.
And so what you often find in a lot of these countries, particularly the very, very well-funded programs, is there's not a trace of them once that project has left town.
Yeah.
Despite all their best kind of like intentions of saying, we're changing the system. They're not changing the system.
It doesn't stick.
It doesn't stick at all because the people there, it's not a real partnership.
No.
So I think that one of the things, to sort of go back to your original point about the business side of things and the commercial side of things, if only we were the provider of products and services which people over there buy as they want. So they buy my products.
And in that regard, you're like every other listener we've got.
And they buy our service, And if my service is good, they'll buy it. And if it's not, they won't.
Yeah.
And so I've got to meet the needs of my client, as it were, and meet their needs and put them at the front and centre of everything I do. And believe me, this is not how charity.
No, because you're asking them, how can I help? What do you need?
Yeah. And it's very difficult to get funding to operate in this way. But what I tend to do is get the funding or establish the joint venture and then slightly subvert it when I get.
Well, more power to you with your fury.
You sell them what you want, and then you give them what they need.
Yeah, but more power to you with that fury, Claire, because I quite often apologise for my various furies about Brexits and women's pensions on this programme. But actually, that's another motivator, isn't it, to change?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I've borrowed from sort of tech side of things is these words like agile and iterative. So you do a little bit and check it works, then a little bit more and check it works.
Yes.
Again, not something that gets done in charities.
No.
They've got to create huge, great funded multi-million pound.
Yeah, but we're on to you now, aren't we?
What?
The general public is on to the charity sector.
Yes, and I think the thing is that no one's come up with a better model.
No.
See, I want to, because there is, largely because of the way charities function, there is a lot of corruption at the other end. Corruption that I totally understand.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I'm working with bilateral funders, which means like government to government funders that I have in some countries, I better not mention any names, I find the most corrupt people that I come across and the most incompetent are the donors. So they're the people who've got their big white cars, their lovely, trips home twice a year, their nice houses. And it's not the people on the ground that are corrupt. No. I mean, they may be a bit corrupt, but they're not taking thousands and thousands.
No.
They're doing what you and me would do, which is putting their kids through school and shoes on their feet and doing a pretty good job along the way. Yeah. And I think probably not being paid enough for it.
No, so the equivalent of stealing from the stationery cupboard, you mean?
Sort of, yes, but I wouldn't call it stealing. I mean, it's not stealing, but it's a very complicated sort of area. I don't think that I'm going to see it change that much, but I do what I can when I'm working with these big partners.
And that's the important bit.
Yeah.
It's just, I can't fix the entire world. What can I fix?
Yeah. And I think that also, like yesterday, I went to a meeting with a consulting agency, and it's a very, very big consulting agency. And they started telling me the kinds of people they needed. And I stopped them and I said, actually, I'm never going to fit into what you need. You've got to see whether what I've got to offer is what you need.
Yeah, marvellous.
Yeah, right.
And I, and that, maybe it's being 58.
It's no kowtowing.
No, but it's just not wanting to waste my time, because I could get paid thousands and thousands of pounds going off and doing a certain project in a certain country. What I want to do with my time is make a difference. I know that sounds a bit cheesy, but I don't want to be paid thousands of pounds to go and do something useless.
No.
And some of my best paid jobs, I just have found that they've been a bit useless.
Yeah.
So
thank you very much. We really, really appreciate you coming on and
well, all hail. I love this podcast.
Well, may there be more motorway service stations in everyone's life, Claire.
Yes.
I'm having visions now of Judith on an African crown with lots of feathers and beads and things. It just.
No, Africa's one of my countries I don't do. If you remember, I'm a bit first world me, but I'm pleased that people like Claire are doing these things. And actually, the humble mobile phone is so, because I'm quite averse to them, but it's so helpful in this.
Yeah. It's reminded me, that's the one thing, Claire, you've reminded me of, is that there are billions, not just millions, billions of people coming online all the time, and those people are there desperate for help, desperate for information, desperate for knowledge.
And the little, just to give you one little message, which is that, when a baby has diarrhea, you have to give them fluids. So you've got hundreds of thousands of babies dying of supposed diarrhea because their parents don't know that they have to hydrate them when they have diarrhea.
Yeah.
And that was what I can turn that into about 120 character message.
Yes, brilliant.
Yeah, marvellous.
To your 10 to 14-year-old, what did you call them? Incredibly powerful influencers.
Yep. And they're brilliant. They learn things in 10 minutes, and then you've got them spreading it all over their families and communities.
Yes,
and go to my website. Anyone who's interested in the detail, go to my website.
No, don't worry, I'll link to both of those in our show.
Yeah. Have a look.
Childrenforhealth.com.
Children for Health, yeah.
.org it is, but I'll link, don't worry. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you. Bye, darling.
Yeah, she's accidentally one of my most successful mentoring students ever, from the point of view of creating and selling an ebook. She created and sold an ebook, and she didn't look at it for ages and ages, and came back to it and found she'd sold, significant 6 figures worth of it. Put it that way.
Well, she's a clever woman, and she is an implementer. She can't implement everything at once, because I think she's got quite a lot of children and she does a lot of travelling abroad, and she describes her work to us very well. And she's a busy woman, but nothing we've ever said to Claire over about 15 or more years has been wasted.
No, absolutely.
Isn't that? It's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is. Right, so what's your word of the week then?
Words, because of what I said to you before. We both love to read and write, but is that the best way to get information across? I'm rather envious of the woman who owns this house. Her email address is words at her domain name, which is quite nice, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Patience is mine, because I've had to practice it rather hard this week.
I bet you have, in 33 degrees.
38 degrees, yes.
38 degrees, yeah.
and I've just had to say to myself, there is absolutely no point in getting angry about this, because that will not affect anything one way or another, and it will upset you.
Yes.
So, I've just had to accept this quirky way of doing things with the Greek mobile phones, and just crack on and just look for the moment where I can get down the beach and swim in that beautiful, glorious sea, which is like my own personal stress buster.
Nicola, we're so grown up now. Because when I first met you, you and I would have railed against that for hours on end about how annoying it was. And we're so grown up now, we just lay back, we accept what the state telecoms
We're
thing
so
was.
zen-like.
Yes, we are.
But it took the Greek telephone system to teach me zen.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Right, so I've got some good project updates for you.
Yeah, good. I'm ready.
Okay, so, let's start with the good stuff. I was looking at our stats today, and we have had, in the last week, 2 400 download days next to each other, pretty much, the 5th and the 8th. And before that, the previous week, we had 2 300 download days on the 20th and the 21st. And looking at our overall numbers, we've gone from an average of 450 to 500 downloads a week. Quite dramatic. You know, we had that big, massive month. Since then, we are averaging 850 to 1,000 downloads a week. So we've pretty much doubled our download numbers over
a week. A week,
yes.
Wow, that's good, isn't it?
I know. We've doubled our download figures per week over the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
Which is really very encouraging.
That's very encouraging. I saw you banged up a new thing that said we'd had 113,000.
Well, that's out of date already. We're up to 115,000 already.
Yay!
So I'll try and keep it updated at least weekly. I think everything else I've been working on has been on hold. Obviously, you can't do much on the internet. I mean, I go down the taverna with my laptop sometimes, but then that means I have to have my laptop on the beach, which means I have to keep it out in the sun because obviously anything...
Not ideal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And but, you know, my mobile's pretty good. I'm doing most things. I'm still trading things and answering things and doing all sorts of things on my mobile, but it's just a bit small. So I am using my old lady's reading glasses quite often.
Yeah.
So that's it for me. What about you?
Oh, well, as I said last week, moving house twice in 2 weeks means there's no space for projects. I tell you what, though, that doesn't half feel like a luxury, having space to fill with bringing ideas to life. If you haven't got it, you don't realise what a luxury it is. And you can't do projects unless you've got space to fill.
Yeah, that's true. And
I mean, if all your effort is used up in, every time I move, I lose a whole day. So in the last 2 weeks, I've lost 2 or 3 days moving.
Yeah, I totally understand. It must be very difficult.
It's okay. It's okay because actually I don't really want to be doing any new projects, but it just made me realise, if she's got space to fill up with projects, that's luxury because I haven't.
Yeah.
And don't forget that for us, projects are about bringing ideas to life, which of course is our favourite thing.
Okie dokes. Who or what's impressed this week? We've got Wobble on the line. Hold on.
I think it's perhaps better now. I can hear you better. Yeah.
Yes, that's better. Okay, so this week it was the 9th Maniacs race in Stupa, which is a biathlon. I don't know. It's a 5,000 meter run, or I'm talking absolute nonsense. It's a 5 kilometer run or a 10 kilometer run, and then you can also do, but you don't have to, I don't think, the swimming, which is 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers swim around the bay. And it was 8 o'clock in the evening. It was still absolutely baking hot, and loads and loads of people competed in it, and it was a very big do. With live radio, we're reporting on it and all that stuff. This Saturday, we've got a street dancing competition of all the local street dancing kids. So that's at 10 o'clock at night. Hopefully it'll be a little bit cooler then. But I'm quite looking forward to that because I do like a bit of street dancing.
I could say that in 38 degrees I could dance in the street at 10 o'clock at night, but that race is very well named for maniacs because people doing that in 38 degrees are completely bonkers.
I know. And my friend Taki's, his son is the local basketball champion and he runs in this race. And he came back afterwards and I said, he's very self-deprecating. And I said, how'd you get on, Spiros? He said, he 27th. And I thought, the very fact you finished it impressed the hell out of me.
Okay, right. So I've got 2 short ones. We're in the middle of the second week of Wimbledon, which is the only sporting event I enjoy annually. And particularly enjoyed our hero Andy Murray playing with Serena Williams in the mixed doubles because he's had a hip replacement operation this year and he's not well enough to play the grueling 5-setters that men play. But he has always been her and her sister's greatest proponent because the journalists always try to make out that his achievement of winning Wimbledon was the most important one, and he always says that. What about all the women that have done it? Anyway, they playing together, which is everybody's dream, and really light-hearted, lovely play on Saturday, which I enjoyed. And also, I think there's something you might like on BBC iPlayer. It might be more my thing than yours, but 2 programmes last week and this about the history and function of the Bank of England.
Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I haven't had any telly
Yeah.
at all, obviously, because no internet means
No,
no
obviously.
telly.
Yeah. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but the tennis and the Bank of England programme brightened and informed my strange week in the knocking shop.
The knocking shop. Oh my God! Oh, if only it were true. Brilliant. Okay, so is that it then?
Yes.
Are we done? Well, we've managed
Yes.
admirably considering the setbacks, but we're there now.
We
so
have.
I'll talk
Yep.
to you next.
See you next week.
Yeah, next week.
Okay.
So, bye.
Yep. All right. Bye.
You've been listening to Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. Do come and visit us at ownitthepodcast.com. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can find out more about Judith and visit her on her website at judithmorgan.com, and you can find Nicola at nicolacairncross.com.